All right, everybody. So today I'm going to be showing you how to manage the state in your Flutter application using BLoC, the BLoC library. And I'm going to be doing that using the Flutter demo application. I'm sure that everybody's aware and familiar with this application. So what we're going to be doing is managing the counter state using the BLoC library rather than local state management, which is what the Flutter demo app does by default. So first of all, let's get started by adding the packages that are required to use BLoC. So these are BLoC, Flutter BLoC, and Equatable. So I'll do that now. I've actually already added BLoC, and then we've got Flutter BLoC, and then we will have Equatable. Cool. I should probably say that I've already turned the My Homepage widget into a stateless widget. It comes as a stateful widget out the box because obviously it has to keep and maintain the counter state within itself. But we're not going to require that anymore because the state will now be handled by BLoC, the BLoC library. So let's create a folder called BLoC, and then the three files that we'll need are a BLoC, an event, and a state file. So let's create those. So let's start from the state file. So this is a class that will actually hold the data of the application, and then that data will be fed into the UI. So I'll use part directives for this. So I'll say that this is part of home block.dart, and then I'll create my class home state, which will extend Equatable. So what I did there is just I sorted out my part directives, my import, so that Equatable gets imported in the home block file rather than the actual state file. And then here I will create all the required properties that I want my UI to respond to. So in this case, there is only one property, which is the counter. So counter. And I'll create this override for the Equatable class and pass in the my counter property. I'll also create a constructor for the class and move it up. And last thing I want to do is create a copy with method, which will allow me to create a new instance of the home state class, which is an immutable class with a varied counter property. Home state copy with, and as a parameter I'll have an optional int, which is my counter, and then I'll return a new instance of home state, to which I'll pass in my function parameter here, counter, and if that's not available I'll just use the class, the value already available in the class for counter. So that's my state class, and then we'll need an event. So again, let's sort out the part directive. Okay, and an event is dispatched by the UI when we want to trigger some action by the BLoC. So in this case, we'll need an increment event to make sure that the counter goes up by 1. I'll start by creating an abstract class home event. And then all of my event classes will be able to inherit from or extend this class. And that is my event. And then finally, last but not least, let's create the BLoC class. We're going to extend BLoC from the BLoC library, and then here we're going to pass in our home event and then our home state. So I'll start with the constructor, home BLoC, and then the super constructor will pass in the initial state here. So home state with a counter state with a counter value of 0 to start with. And then here we will be able to define which methods should respond to which events. So on increment counter, which remember is the event that we just created here, I will execute a method, which I'll write in a minute. And this is a private method called increment counter. For the increment counter method, we'll create a void increment counter. And this will take in a increment counter event. And it will also take in an emitter home state, which we'll call emit. Cool. So what I want to do now is anytime this event is received or dispatched by the UI, I want to increment my counter by 1. So what I effectively want to do is I want to emit a new instance of the home block class with a counter incremented by 1. So let's do that. Emit state.copyWith, which is the function that we just created. Counter will be state.counter plus 1. And that is all the business logic taken care of. Now let's move to the UI layer and make sure that the UI can interact with the business logic that we've just created. Okay, so now on the UI layer, I need to dispatch the block event that we just created. So from here, I'll pass into this function build context. And I will then do context.read, pass in my home block as a generic, and then add the increment counter event that we just created, use the const keyword here. And then I will edit this so that I can pass in our context into the function. All right. Now the last thing we need to do is make sure that the UI responds and is in sync with the counter value that we are storing in the block. So in order to do that, we need to create a super widget, or at least that's how I like to do it. And I will call this home page provider, which is probably not the best naming you could give it. And I will create a block provider of my home block here. And as a child, I need to create the instance of that block, home block. And then as a child, I'll pass in my home page here with a title of, we actually don't need, but actually let's keep the title property here, and I'll just take it from here. And then instead of passing in my home page here, we'll pass in home page provider. So this step that we've just done is necessary so that we can insert a instance of the home block within the widget tree that is above the widget that will be using the state that's included in this block. Now, in my home page, I am now able to access the state of the block. So what I will do is I'll wrap this in a block builder, and I'll specify as a generic my state, first my block and then my state, and then I need to pass in the state into this function here, and then I can now edit this text, which corresponds with the counter on screen, and use my state.counter, and I'll stringify it so that it can be used within the text widget. And that's pretty much everything we need to know. So moment of truth, I'll reload the app and we'll see how it goes. Here we go. So I'll press on the button now, and as you can see, the counter is incrementing. Okay, so now let's kind of step through the code and take a look retrospectively at what we've just done. So if I put a breakpoint into this increment counter function, I will see that when I click increment, my code will stop here. And here is where we dispatch the event that we just created in home event.dar. And this is our event class. And then this event is used in the block. So if I put the next breakpoint here, I'll see that the debugger stops here. And this is when the block actually emits a new instance of my state with the counter property incremented by 1. And let's not forget that this is a function that we declared within our home state class that extends equatable. Now, back on the UI level, we will see that if I put a breakpoint below the block builder, once the block emits the new state, the debugger will stop here because the UI is now responding to the new state that has been emitted, and it will rebuild so that this widget can represent the new value of the counter. There we go. So yeah, I hope you found some value in this video. I really love using BLoC for all of the applications that I create with Flutter, just because it helps me keep that separation between business logic and UI, and I really love that about it. If you like the video, please subscribe to my channel. I'm just starting out, and I'd love to see as many of you in my channel as possible. Hit the notification bell to stay updated on when I create a new video. I will be posting videos weekly with tips and tricks and explanations and talks around the Flutter framework. Thank you, and see you next time.